Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host for the evening, the Content Chair for Cloud Identity Summit, Andy Hindle.
Good evening, New Orleans. Oh, really? Really? Worse than this morning with Brian. I'm never going to hear the end of that. Good evening, New Orleans. Oh, there we go. Except you got it wrong again. I'm reliably informed by some locals that I met just last night along this famous street back here. Nolens, we're supposed to call it. Oh, well done. Good. Repeating. I like that. That's excellent. So one of the fun things about having been involved with CIS in various capacities for about 7 years, actually exactly 7 years, is kind of watching the community that we have grow and develop. Andre pointed this out on the first day, just with the size of the audience. We actually have over 50% of our presenters this year are net new to CIS. Now, having presented to some individuals in this audience, I know that it's not the easiest thing to stand up in front of your peers and do that. So anyone that's net new here presenting for the first time is very brave and should really deserve our thanks, I think. It's also good to be able to welcome back, old colleagues and friends and talk about some of the progress that we've seen over the years at Cloud Identity Summit. Some of you might remember a keynote from Monterey. How many of you were at CIS in Monterey? All right. So some of you remember a keynote back there about the state of the standards in our industry, what became known as the round wheel speech. How many of you were in San Diego last year? Slightly bigger number. Excellent. So those of you that were at San Diego last year will remember a story about the evolution of the identity industry, the TCP/IP moment speech. So this year, I was approached by the individual who gave both of those speeches. He said, hey, I'd really like just 5 minutes to address the biggest gathering of our profession about the state of our profession, and kind of move that story along a little bit. So it gives me great pleasure this evening to welcome to the stage someone who's been a stalwart of CIS for many years, friend and colleague, Ian Glazer.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks to the CIS family for having me back. I have 2 questions for you. First one, these are big block questions. How'd you get here? And I don't mean, how did you not fly here through what city because of thunderstorms? What I mean is, how did you get to this point in your career? How did you learn the identity arts? Now, if you were lucky, you had a mentor or you had an advocate. But more likely than not, you learn by doing. You talk to vendors and you learn their products, and you talk to implementation specialists and you learn their approaches, and you talk to analysts and you learned about the market, and you talk to peers at events like this one. Now, that's a really piecemeal approach. It's a really heavy effort approach. And it may have worked for us, but I don't think it can, nor should it work for the next generation of identity professionals. Hold that, and let's go to the second question. How many of you in your organization are seen as equals to your security and privacy peers? You see, the relationship between security and privacy gets a lot of rightly deserved attention. But I don't think that privacy nor security can fully meet the challenges set before them, in part because the tools that they have are the wrong ones for the job. Their toolbox is missing the things that identity provides. And in that regard, identity is the missing third leg of the stool. But identity isn't widely seen that way. Right? We're not acknowledged as an industry as the key to improving service delivery. We're not widely acknowledged as the key to increasing customer satisfaction. We're not widely acknowledged as the way to grow our businesses. And although we all know the vital role that identity plays, the larger world simply doesn't. And in that regard, identity's voice is missing at the table. And I think this is in part due to the fact that unlike security and privacy, identity has never formally professionalized. Privacy and security, they have professional organizations. And these organizations are dedicated to the betterment of their industries. And they offer services like professional development and shared practices, certifications, forums for interaction. Consider that ISACA formed in 1976, IAPP formed in 2000, ISC squared came along in 88, and the CISSP came along in 94. Yet, in that entire time, a professional identity organization never formed. You mean to tell me we weren't doing this over all that time? We weren't being identity professionals? Well, of course we were. And we were focusing on standards, right? We were learning as we go in enterprise. But we did not formally professionalize. In the moments ahead, I believe this must change. I believe in the moments ahead that we come together to formally professionalize identity management in order to enhance the services that we deliver and increase the awareness for the vital role that identity plays. And we do this to improve ourselves. If we want to be seen as equals to security and privacy, and if we want to better the current and future generations of identity professionals, I think this requires an organization whose sole mission is the professionalization of our industry. Well, what would that organization look like? Well, its mission would be the tide that lifts all boats. It would be a place for professionals to learn how to make their programs and projects better. It would be a place for them to grow their own careers. It would be a place for them to learn how to work better, more closely with security and privacy and lines of business. It would be an independent voice that extols the virtues of identity management to the larger world. And it would we would be an equal to, a partner and equal to security and privacy, as well as a crucial peer to lines of business in order to delight our customers. A professionalized identity industry benefits every single one of us, from technology suppliers to implementation specialists to analysts to individual practitioners. Improving the visibility and the quality of our market increases the chance of our success at a personal level and an organizational level. If we want a seat at the decision-making table, if we want to be equals to security and privacy, if we want to improve and grow our opportunities in our businesses, then we must strive for a professionalized industry. And professionalizing identity should be our mission so that the next wave can benefit, so that our organizations can benefit, and most importantly, so that our customers can benefit. But how do we take this next step forward? How do we step towards professionalized identity? Here's where I'm pleased to announce that the Kantara initiative has stepped forward in a big way. Now, some of you have seen, some of us have this, I signed the pledge. This has nothing to do with AA. What they have done, what Kantara has done, is created a microsite over at kantarainitiative.org where you can indicate your support for the idea of a professionalized identity industry. You get one of these cool badges. And what Kantara will do is it will take the names of the people that have indicated their support and create a working group with those individuals. And that working group is going to collect and explore ideas for what should the shape of this professional organization be? What should its goals be? What should its principles be? Its values? What services should it deliver? So if you want to be seen as an equal to security and privacy, if you want to better this industry, if you want to better the next generation of professionals in this industry, if you want to better yourself, then I urge you strongly, show your support for this notion of a professionalized identity industry. Check out the pledge at Kantara, join the following discussion. Here's to the industry's future, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ian. So, I think it's very telling in terms of the maturity of the industry, both that we have now, but also where we need to take it over the next few years to get this kind of initiative along, and I hope that everyone really supports that. At the same time, we need to help the senior executives that make decisions that impact the jobs and the work that we do in this industry to get a better handle on why identity is important and how they should think about building intelligent identity into their security practices, into the businesses that they build. So Forrester have been doing some work looking into how to help CISOs and other C-level executives understand and champion identity within their businesses, really as a core element of security. And so I'm delighted to welcome actually another new speaker at CIS this year, a research director at Forrester for Security and Risk, Stephanie Balaouras.
Right, everyone. Andy, thanks for the introduction. So, as Andy said, I'm a new speaker, and I'm really excited to be here to talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about. And I know I'm the last speaker between you and a drink, which is very important. And more importantly, I have a 15-month-old baby at home, so I need a drink. So, so I will try to make this as engaging, as entertaining, and as informative as I can. It's interesting, when I got here today, I was in line at the registration desk. Someone came up to me, they looked at my badge, they're like, "Oh, are you an analyst for Forrester?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I love you guys. You guys convince the suits to do the right thing." And I thought about it for a second, I was like, that's great. I'm like, if I can accomplish that today, if I can arm you with enough data and information and insight to go back and convince your executives to do the right thing when it comes to identity and security, I'll have considered this a very successful presentation. That will make me happy. Particularly you can couple it with your own institutional knowledge about your business, as well as just your technical depth and your passion for the topic. So that's my goal for today. And the 12 recommendations that I'm going to review, these are recommendations that we put together every year for our clients. And what we do is all 20-plus people on the security and risk team, we get together and we analyze all of the data that we get from our thousands of client engagements, the research interviews that we do, the advisory engagements, and we basically boil it down to the 12 recommendations that we think are critical for the CISO, the ones that will have the biggest impact on security strategy in the coming year. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over those 12 recommendations, but I'm going to give it an identity flair. I'm going to talk about it in the context of identity. I'm also going to begin the presentation with Forrester's view on the role of identity and security, which, I'll give a little news flash, we believe is fundamental to security. It is one of the tools in the security toolbox, if you will. To some extent, I'm even surprised that that's still a question today, because it's never been for us. For the 6 years that I've been the research director of the team, that's how we've approached identity, as being core to security. But it's worth going over the why. The other thing I'll do at the beginning of the presentation is just give you some context for the 12 recommendations that I think will set them apart from what you normally hear in a security presentation, because our approach to security, I think, is very different. So with that, let's get into it. So everybody guess what this number is? 47%. This is the percentage of revenue that by 2020 will come from digital products and digitally enhanced products and services and through digital channels. It's a big number, 47%. Now, digital is probably one of those soon becoming overused words. It's probably the threat intel of 2 years ago. Threat intel was really overused. But there's two dimensions to transforming yourself into a digital business. The first is actual digital customer experience. And when we say customer experience, it's about digitizing the end-to-end customer experience. It's not just about having a mobile app. It's about the experience from a website all the way through to a store. It's about taking physical products and enhancing them with digital capabilities. So if you're used to selling digital products, it could be cars, airplanes, engines. I learned today even socks. If you digitally enhance them with sensors, you think about the kinds of information that you can collect from those devices. Location, usage, it's things that you can then turn around and sell back to customers in the form of mobile apps or enhanced services, or ways that you can actually monetize additional data insight. And it's also about digital operational excellence. If you want to be a good digital business, it's not just, again, about a mobile app. You have to think about your entire back-end infrastructure. You have to think about how you transform your supply chains, how you do inventory and warehousing, how you do customer tracking and delivery of products. It's our core IT infrastructure for delivering services. Do we have the ability to quickly roll out new products and services? Do we have the ability to meet new customer demands or spikes in customer demands depending on the year? So it's those two dimensions. Again, it's so much more than a mobile app. And we've heard a lot about customer experience, and there's a good reason why CMOs, CIOs, your CEO talk about customer experience all the time. Let me show you a little bit of data. So Forrester actually has a measurement for customer experience. We call it our Customer Experience Index. And if we look at the leaders in our Customer Experience Index and we compare them to customer experience laggards, you will see a huge difference in their revenue growth. Customer experience leaders outperform laggards by, in some cases, double digits. That's a significant amount of money. Depending on your industry, you're talking about tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars in difference in revenue. So that's why CMOs are up at night thinking about customer experience. And it goes without saying that identity plays a huge role in customer experience. You think about what it takes to actually authenticate to a mobile application or complete a complex transaction that has a high risk. It's huge. 76%. What do we think this number is? This is the percentage of employees who use multiple devices for work. We have a stream of research at Forrester around workforce enablement, and it's built on a very intuitive and proven premise that happy employees lead to happy customers, and happy customers drive revenue growth. So when you think about a digital company, it's not just the digital experience and the operational excellence, it's the way that they actually empower their workforce to do the right thing by their customers. And happy, productive employees are going to use the devices and the apps that they want to get their jobs done. And it's our job as security professionals and identity professionals to enable that. 52%. This is the percentage of firms indicating that adopting a public cloud platform is a critical or a high or critical priority in 2016. This is the Cloud Identity Summit. I don't think I need to go over the importance of cloud. What I will tell you is there's some follow-up questions to this data, which is you ask firms why they're prioritizing the cloud, why it's so important to them. And the interesting thing is that the discussion has shifted from one of economics. It's actually not about economics. It's not about cost savings. What people actually say is the most important reason why they're moving to the cloud. It's actually things like agility, it's resiliency, it's scale, and interestingly enough, probably a bit surprising to us as security professionals, they'll often list security. So it's a completely different conversation. It's not about economics. It's about meeting business demand and being agile. 58%. Any guesses? This is the percentage of breaches that are due to insider activity. It's a security presentation. I have to include some scary statistics in here. It wouldn't be a security presentation without it. So I did cheat a little bit. I included in this statistic not only employees, but I included contractors, and I included employees of partners as well. But the interesting thing is if you look at the external caused attacks as well, most of them actually target privileged identity users to compromise their credentials. So as one of the analysts on my team, John Kindervag, always says, all breaches are an inside job. So it's an important trend. So that brings us to today's approach to security, which for the most part is still a very perimeter-centric approach. And the problem with this is it's perimeter-centric. It doesn't make any sense given the market shifts that we just discussed. It doesn't make sense in a world where your business leaders are constantly looking for new ways to engage customers. They're building dynamic ecosystems of value with all sorts of third parties. They're enabling the workforce with multiple devices. And it certainly doesn't make sense where the majority of breaches are actually caused by internal activity. Because it's got a fundamental flaw in it, which is this idea that somehow there's this external network that's untrusted, but an internal network that's trusted. It's just a false premise. So it's built on a false premise, and it doesn't work for today's digital business. So Forrester's approach is something we call zero trust security. And we use the term zero trust for a couple reasons. The first is all network traffic is untrusted. Doesn't matter, internal, external, we don't make a distinction. All network traffic is untrusted. Number one, we never assume trust of anything. Not an asserted identity, not an app, not a device. Trust always has to be continuously assessed and reassessed. And the third is security professionals like it. It really lends itself well to their mindset, zero trust. So that's the reason why we call it zero trust. The thing I would also point out about zero trust is when we talk about developing new security capabilities, we now talk about it in 3 dimensions. You have to be able to build security capabilities regardless of hosting model. Again, doesn't matter if it's on-prem, on the cloud, hosted private cloud, you name your architectural model, it doesn't matter. It has to be across user populations, customers, partners, employees, contractors, you name the user population, and it has to be regardless of device or app access channel. So if your security capability can't do that, it's limited, it's siloed. And for us, when we talk about the core pillars or the core tenets of identity, it's actually built on of zero trust. It's actually built on 3, of which identity is one of those 3 pillars. So if there's nothing else I can convey today, and I'll repeat it again, is that identity for us is actually core to the fundamental way that we approach security today. It's core to our zero trust model of security. So again, those 3 pillars, the first one is ensuring that protection travels with the data itself. For the most part, we're talking about encryption here. It doesn't necessarily have to be encryption, but usually it is. It's about encrypting the data in flight and encrypting the data at rest, again, across those 3 dimensions. And in many instances, it's also about retaining the keys for ourselves. The second, as I mentioned, identity. Limiting and strictly enforcing access is critical. You know, if you look at some of the biggest breaches of the last couple of years, so many of them either could have A, been prevented, or B, the damage of them could have been significantly limited if there had been much stronger access controls in place. I love to use this one example. In 2014, the Korean credit bureau suffered this massive breach. A malicious insider, actually a contractor, downloaded over 100 or stole 100 million records, which equated to about 20 million people, which is 40% of the population of South Korea. And he did it because he had unfettered access to the production databases actually containing all of the customer information. There's no reason that I can think of where a contractor, even an internal employee, needed unfettered access to that much information in a production database. Again, could have been drastically and easily limited or prevented. The third pillar is maintaining real-time visibility and analysis across this environment. This is important because too often today in security, the firm that actually experiences the breach is the last person to know that they've actually suffered a breach. They're often told by a third party. It could be a government agency, it could be a customer, it actually could be a partner. And in many instances, if you look at some of the biggest breaches, again, in the last couple of years, and you can rattle them off, I don't want to single people out, but in many instances, it was weeks, if not months, before the company actually realized that they had breach. All that time, the attackers had unfettered access to all of the systems within that environment. So we need better detection capabilities so that we can rapidly identify breaches and we can stop the broader impact before it becomes a significant breach. So those are our 3 pillars. 21%. This is a good number. This is a very good number. This is a happy number. This is the percentage of the IT budget that's currently allocated to security. When I first became the research director of the team about 6 years ago, this was 10%. 10%. So it's more than doubled in just 5 or 6 years. It's a huge number. The good thing for identity is, you know, because it's so pivotal to security, this is a great budget to actually be a part of. And actually, interesting thing about this as well, a lot of people often tell me, well, oh, financial services spends so much more, you know, that's skewing the number. Actually, no, the top industries are manufacturing, retail, financial services was actually in the middle. The one industry that was really low, and it's something that I actually think needs to be rectified, is healthcare. They were down at 16%. People nervously laughing or sadly laughing, tragically laughing. Another follow-up piece of data is if you actually look at the percentage of identity management, it's actually 8% of the security budget, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 8%, it's been 8% consistently for the last few years. That's 8% of a budget that's doubled. The other thing that I would point out here is look at the number do I have a pointer? No, I just went backwards. I don't have a pointer. If you look at the budget for network security, it's at 13%. When I first started in this role, it was up at 20, 25%. People aren't spending less on network security, because the security budget has doubled, so they're still spending net more on network security. But if you look at how they're spreading the wealth, they're spreading it much more evenly. So there's a much more holistic approach to security today that's inclusive of identity, granular data security controls, as well as a network-based approach. So you can already see how this shift is occurring in the budget itself. The other thing I would point out is we asked security leaders, to what extent are you responsible for the following activities? Look at identity and access management. It's number 3 on that list. It's only 3 to threat and vulnerability management and data security. So what you should do is take those last 3 slides, print them out, and go knock on your CISO's door. Say, we should be spending 20% of the IT budget on security. We should be spending at least 8% of that budget on identity, and a much more holistic approach to all the other areas. And if your CISO isn't taking the lead, if your CISO's not championing identity and access management, they are lagging. He or she is lagging their peers right now. They're behind the industry approach when it comes to it. Okay. So the second half is going over the 12 recommendations. I really wanted to set that context, and I'll go through them relatively quickly. And if we break them up into 6 strategic recommendations, meaning you might not necessarily be able to accomplish them within the year. This is a multi-year engagement. And then 6 tactical recommendations, meaning they're more focused on operational execution, but they're all equally important. So the first, build relationships with C-level executives. This sounds like Forrester. Don't all C-level executives do that. The emphasis that I want to put here is CISOs are very good at building relationships with CIOs and people who tend to be extensions of the security and risk role. Chief privacy officers, chief risk officers, the head legal counsel, anybody in charge of compliance. Those relationships are important, but the relationships that the CISO needs to continue to build are new influencers on security, like the chief marketing officer. In many industries, particularly industries that actually monetize a lot of the data they collect, you'll often see new roles like the chief data officer as well. These are the roles that we're talking about. And I actually think identity is a great way of actually starting to build these relationships and starting that conversation, because identity has a huge impact on things that the CMO cares about. The CMO cares about customer experience. Identity has a huge impact on customer experience. Second thing is, customers actually really care about privacy. There's this notion that customers don't care about privacy. No, they do. They care about it a lot. In fact, they vote with their wallets. In fact, at Forrester, we have a key research initiative that says that privacy is actually a competitive differentiator. It's not a regulatory mandate to achieve at the lowest possible cost. If you do it right, customers will actually do more business with you. There may be opportunities to charge for privacy-enhanced services. There may be new products, privacy-focused products that you can roll out. The other thing that we've found is customers will actually share more information with you if they trust you and they trust how you're going to use their private information. So we see it as a competitive differentiator. And actually, I think it was Ian who mentioned, identity, the capabilities within identity are actually central to actually enabling customer privacy, to protecting customers from privacy abuses. If you lead with that conversation, customer experience, obviously security, because you want to protect customers from account takeovers, fraud, other things, they care about that, as well as privacy, that's an easy conversation to have with a CMO, and you will get their attention. The second is actually expanding the charter of the CISO to include customer-facing security. Today, for the most part, CISOs tend to be focused on compliance and securing the back-end systems of record. Those things are important. They don't go away. That's why we get 21% of the budget. But you have to add to your charter customer-facing security considerations. And again, identity, the capabilities that you can achieve with customer-facing identity solutions, they can do all of these things. They can help promote customer security and privacy. They can actually increase customer acquisition rates if you make, for example, like their authentication process seamless. So you achieve great digital CX, at the same time you're actually improving their CX is a huge win. You think about the insights that you can actually gain from users if you have the ability to actually see them across digital channels. That's information that marketers and other people will love. So again, expand your charter to include customer-facing security. 3, demand a role in securing product and service development. Today, the CISO and his or her direct reports are not engaged by the CMO in product development in customer-facing solutions. They're not engaging them. If anything, they're probably turning to the digital agencies that they're hiring to develop their mobile app or redesign their website, or they're hiring a consultancy. Again, we're missing an opportunity to play a huge role in the value that the company's delivering to customers. You don't want to end up being the CISOs that just looking at the back-end systems of record and just at regulatory compliance. And again, these are the kinds of capabilities that, from an identity perspective, an identity professional perspective, you want to see embedded in customer-facing security and products right from the beginning, not attempted to be added on later. The other thing I would say, too, is it also impacts the kinds of skills that we need on security teams. It means that we need people who are more familiar with secure app development, with fraud management, with identity access. So it kind of changes the kinds of skills that you need on your team. Number 4, define your IoT use cases. So there's been a lot of discussion on IoT. I think every keynote's mentioned it. There's been several sessions dedicated to it. I don't need to go over the importance of it or the role of identity plays. I think what I want to emphasize here is IoT is real. What we have to do as security and identity professionals is get very specific to our industry and our firm. The use cases for our firm, and in Forrester we've identified 8 use cases that we've actually already seen in production. And depending on those use cases is what's going to necessitate the kinds of security and identity solutions that you need to put in place. But some of the use cases include things like actually security and surveillance. It's inventory and warehousing. It's customer tracking and delivery. It's facilities management. It's industrial asset management. It's fleet management. There are some very specific use cases that actually go across industries. So identify those specific use cases that apply to you, and that will drive your security requirements. 5, help lead your firm's cloud-first strategy. Again, we're at the Cloud Identity Summit. I don't think I need to discuss the importance of cloud. What I'll emphasize here is, again, hearkening back to the biggest drivers are actually agility and scale. What I would also say is it's not really a binary decision with cloud either. What you'll find is if you're a large enterprise, for the foreseeable future, you're going to be dealing in a very complex hybrid environment where because of the nature of certain applications, they're legacy applications. Maybe they were built on proprietary platforms. Maybe for security reasons, you actually don't want to move them in the cloud. There's a whole host of reasons why you might continue to have a lot of apps on premise. And then when you think about adopting cloud services, there's a range of public cloud models for infrastructure as a service, for platform as a service, for SaaS. So what we have to do as security professionals and identity professionals is sort of manage that really complex hybrid environment, where a basic business process is going to be this composite of apps that are both on-prem and off-prem. And what we found is even for the same category of cloud service, like infrastructure as a service, clients will often use multiple cloud providers. So we're also talking about having heterogeneous cloud operations. So the cloud discussion isn't a simple one, and it's not over. And we play a big role in enabling that hybrid environment. 6, quantify the economic value of data. The emphasis I want to put here, and this is going to tie into the next recommendation, is if you want to apply granular protections directly to the data itself, you're not going to encrypt everything in your environment. It would be too expensive, too complicated. But the important thing is you want to protect the most sensitive data. And oftentimes we decide that the most sensitive data is the stuff that's regulated. Is this regulated by PCI? Is it regulated by HIPAA? That's just one way of classifying the data. It's one lens of the classification. What we really have to understand is what is the actual business value of the data? Is it customer facing? How much revenue does it generate? Actually, what is the value of it on the black market? Because that will inform the extent to which somebody is willing to go after it. So we have to understand more than just basic compliance classification. And again, that information drives a lot of the policies, including the policies that we develop for identity and access management. So tactical recommendations. I've got about a minute and a half left. I think I can go through them quickly. This is the one I was talking about. I have to be transparent. I've included this one every year for the last 3 years because it drives me crazy. Again, part of our zero trust model is about applying protections very closely to the data, limiting strictly enforcing access controls. But you actually have to know your data to do that, to develop the right policies and apply the right policies. Firms do not inventory and classify their data, and it just drives me to no end. So I'm going to keep including this one in there until I see firms actually doing it. 8, build microperimeters to protect your sensitive data. So I don't want anybody to go home and tell their CISO, Forrester says we don't need our next-gen firewall anymore because we don't need perimeter-based controls. There is a nuance to zero trust. We don't need one giant monolithic perimeter. What we need are microperimeters. And it goes together with inventory and classification and the access controls. What we're doing is we're building the perimeters closer to the data and the applications itself, moving the protections closer to the applications and the data itself, as well as the access controls. So it's about microperimeters as opposed to giant monolithic perimeters. 9, endpoint security. This is an interesting one. Right now, we're probably tracking somewhere between 20 to 25 security startups that are doing nothing but targeting endpoint security control. Some of it was needed. If you look at a lot of the basic AV capabilities that you get in your typical endpoint security suite, they're largely ineffective. So a lot of them are focused on the ability to do detection. It's all about detection, being able to detect a malicious process or user behavior on the endpoint before it becomes a larger breach. The interesting thing is there's actually a whole lot of overlap with the user behavior analysis that you can gain from most identity and access management products. In fact, we see a lot of consolidation of the products here. So if you think as an identity professional you don't have a role to play in endpoint security, 10% of the security budget, absolutely wrong. There's a huge role for identity on the endpoint. And for us, it's both prevention and detection. Anybody who says prevention is dead is just wrong. Number 9, create a detailed roadmap for security analytics. For us, when we talk about security analytics, we talk about 3 capabilities. The ability to get better forewarning of threats on the horizon to your business, the ability to identify vulnerabilities that cyber criminals are likely to exploit and have the biggest impact on the business, and 3, the ability to very quickly detect the telltale signs of a breach in progress so you can stop it immediately and limit the damage. Now, again, there's been a huge emphasis on identity intelligence throughout this conference. For us, it's huge. Identity intelligence, when you think about that unified view into user behavior across the entire environment, that is one of the critical elements for us of security analytics and those 3 capabilities that we just outlined. If you saw in that presentation, I think security operations got another 10% of the security budget. Here's another 10% that you guys play a huge role in. 11, embrace and prepare for security automation. You know, for far too long, if a security analyst in the SOC actually saw suspicious activity, he or she would probably actually take several days of investigation before they actually made a recommendation about whether to block that traffic. In today's world, we can't wait days to actually block what we think is malicious traffic. So the next stage in security is going to be to actually automate that response and to enable the security team to take that automated action. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to work with the business to actually define policies up front, set confidence levels, and if those thresholds are met, it automatically triggers a security response. And the thing with security automation is it's going to require cross-domain collaboration. So for example, if there's an alert that's triggered from an endpoint, if there's something suspicious happening on the endpoint, imagining now that if that alert meets a certain confidence threshold, like you're 90% confident that this is likely malicious activity, imagine immediately being able to use an agent on that endpoint to make sure you capture everything in memory. Simultaneously, you make sure that all network traffic is being logged and inspected. Then maybe that endpoint is actually contained in its own VLAN. And then you're also resetting a user's ID and password, all happening automatically. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about with security automation, where in the past, it would take days to justify that kind of action. We're going to do it immediately. I either got 3 extra minutes or did I get some extra time? Okay. Number 12, invest in incident response and customer breach response. This is an area where companies are woefully behind on their capabilities in IR. At some point, you will suffer a major breach. The difference between your company being able to limit the damage and limit the damage to your long-term reputation as a company is how mature your response is to the event. It makes a huge difference. Actually, if you look at the TalkTalk breach that happened in the UK, I think it was a year ago today, but just recently they posted some revenues. They had a 50% decline in profits as a result of the breach that they had, 50% decline. I think a lot of it had to do with how they handled the breach. They put the blame on their customers. They didn't take any responsibility for it at all. So I think it had a huge impact. And again, identity intelligence plays a huge role in here. It's an enormous wealth of information that you can actually use during that second phase, which is the detection and the analysis. So, I'm out of breath. Oh, that must be 4 minutes over, actually. So again, I wanted to leave you, if I haven't made this abundantly clear, I just want to emphasize it again. For us, identity is a core tenet of our zero trust model of information security, and that's what I want you to go home, knock on your door, and talk to your CISO about. It's the pillar. It's one of the 3 pillars of security. And again, my hope is you can use all of the data, you can use all the arguments, you can use all the 12 recommendations to go in there and reinforce that idea. Because I agree with Ian, who was up here before me, it is critical, and without identity, we can't keep up with the new threats in today's digital environment. So with that, I just want to thank everyone, and hopefully you'll have me back next year. And I think I hand it off to Andy.